Have you ever searched for truth so hard that finding it destroyed your entire world? Today I'm sharing how a simple debate with a Christian classmate led me down a path that would cost me my family, my future, and nearly my sanity, but gave me something worth more than all of it combined. I would love you to listen to this with all the attention that you can. Don't allow anything distract you from this great truth I'm about to reveal. Please comment below where you're watching from so we can connect as a global family and continue to be strengthened by each other's faith. Your story matters, and together we're stronger. I was born in 1991 in Dearborn, Michigan, into a devout Muslim family. My father was an imam at our local mosque, and my mother led women's prayer groups and taught Quran classes. I grew up wearing hijab, memorizing Arabic prayers, and fasting during Ramadan. Islam wasn't just my religion. It was my identity, my culture, my entire framework for understanding the world. By the time I started graduate school in 2013 to study medicine at age 22, I was confident in my faith. I had debated Christians, atheists, and people of other religions throughout high school and college, and I always won. I knew the Quran inside and out. I could recite the arguments against Christianity perfectly, how the Bible had been corrupted, how the Trinity made no sense, how Jesus was just a prophet and not God's son. Everything changed when I met two Christian students in my graduate program that fall. We became study partners for our anatomy class, spending hours together in the library. They were kind, intelligent, and surprisingly knowledgeable about their faith. We would take breaks from studying to debate religion, and I loved it. I saw it as an opportunity to show them the truth of Islam. After several weeks of these debates, one of them made a suggestion that would change my life forever. He told me that we both believed strongly in our faiths, but logically we couldn't both be right. We could both be wrong, sure, but we couldn't both be correct about who Jesus was. Either he was just a prophet as I believed, or he was God's son as they believed. He proposed we do something radical. He would give me a Bible, I would give him a Quran, and we would each study the other's holy book seriously and honestly. Then we would discuss what we found. I agreed immediately because, secretly, I wanted to convert him to Islam. I was confident that once I showed him all the evidence, all the logical arguments, he would see that Islam was true. We exchanged books that week. I gave him a beautiful English translation of the Quran with commentary. He gave me a Bible, both Old and New Testaments. I took it home and hid it in my closet, planning to read it only when my parents weren't around. If they found out I was reading a Bible, even for debate purposes, they would be furious. Over the next 2 months, I studied intensely. I came to our meetings with bullet points, arguments, and what I thought were devastating proofs against Christianity. I showed him contradictions I thought I'd found in the Bible. I explained why the crucifixion didn't make sense, why God wouldn't need a son, why the Trinity was illogical. And honestly, I felt like I was winning our debates. But something strange was happening inside me. Even though I felt I had successfully shown him that Christianity was flawed and Islam was true, I didn't feel the satisfaction I expected. Instead, I felt unsettled. For the first time in my life, I wanted proof, not just arguments, but real, solid proof that what I believed was true. I started praying more intensely than ever before. I would wake up at night and pray to Allah, begging him to show me clear evidence that Islam was true. I fasted extra days beyond Ramadan. I read the Quran more carefully. I wanted some kind of sign, some confirmation that would settle the unrest growing in my heart. But instead of peace, I started experiencing something I can only describe as torment. It began in January 2014. My mind, which had always been sharp and clear, began to feel foggy and confused. I couldn't concentrate on my studies. Thoughts would race through my head at night, keeping me awake. Questions I had never allowed myself to ask began surfacing. What if I was wrong? What if Jesus really was more than a prophet? What if everything I'd been taught was incomplete? For someone studying to be a doctor, someone with a science background who prided myself on logic and clear thinking, losing control of my mind was terrifying. I felt like I was going crazy. I would sit in class and realize I hadn't heard anything the professor said because my mind was spinning with questions about God, truth, Jesus, and eternity. I didn't tell anyone what was happening. How could I? My parents would think I was being attacked by evil spirits for reading the Christian Bible. My Muslim friends would tell me to stop talking to the Christians and increase my prayers. But I couldn't stop. I was desperate to know the truth, even though seeking it was destroying my peace. By March 2014, I had reached my lowest point. I remember one particular night, lying on my bedroom floor, crying and praying to Allah. I told him I couldn't do this one more day. The mental torment was too much. I needed answers. I needed peace. I needed to know who he really was. The very next day, I received a text message from my Christian friend. He told me he and his church had been praying for me. His pastor had put together some notes from a book about the historical evidence for Jesus' death and resurrection. He asked if I would be willing to read it. Normally, I would have refused. But I was at such a low point that I thought, why not? I had nothing to lose. He sent me the document, and I started reading it that evening. The material presented archaeological evidence, historical documents, and testimony from non-Christian sources about Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. What struck me most was how much proof existed for these events. I had been taught that the Bible was corrupted and unreliable, but here was evidence from outside the Bible confirming that Jesus really died and that his followers truly believed they saw him alive again. The historical case was stronger than I'd ever imagined. Something shifted in me that night. I picked up the Bible again, but this time I read it differently. Instead of reading it looking for mistakes and contradictions, I read it as though it might actually be true. I read the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and for the first time, I let myself feel the beauty of the stories. Jesus healing the sick, forgiving sinners, welcoming outcasts, sacrificing himself for humanity. It was beautiful in a way I had never allowed myself to see before. A few days later, I called a Christian woman I had met through a volunteer organization. I asked her about Jesus, about what it meant to follow him. She listened to my questions patiently, then said something that shocked me. She told me that if I was curious and wondering, I could simply ask Jesus to come into my heart. She said I had nothing to lose by praying that prayer. But she didn't understand. She didn't know that for a Muslim, asking Jesus into your heart wasn't a small thing. It was the ultimate betrayal. It was leaving Islam, which meant hell for eternity according to everything I'd been taught. Muslims believe that leaving Islam is an unforgivable sin. There's no coming back from it. You're destined for eternal punishment. I sat in my room that night, terrified and confused. Everything I'd been taught told me not to do this. But something deeper inside me was pulling me toward Jesus. Finally, I looked up and spoke out loud. I told Allah that I didn't know who he really was anymore. I said that whoever the true God was, I wanted to give my life to him. And then, trembling, I said that if Jesus was God, he could come into my heart. I went to sleep that night not knowing what to expect. But when I woke up the next morning, something was different. The torment in my mind was completely gone. The racing thoughts, the confusion, the mental fog, all of it had lifted. I felt peaceful for the first time in months. It was like someone had turned off a noise I didn't even realize had been constantly buzzing in my head. I was still logical and cautious by nature. I told myself I would give this 3 or 4 years of serious exploration. I would study the Gospels carefully and objectively. I would remain Muslim publicly, of course. I would never actually leave Islam, but I would investigate Christianity thoroughly to understand what had happened to me. That Sunday, I decided to visit a church for the first time in my life. I told my parents I was going to the library to study. I wore my hijab, parked far from the church building, and slipped inside hoping no one would notice me. I sat in the back row, watching people sing and worship. They raised their hands toward heaven, and I could see joy on their faces. Something in my heart wanted to do the same, but I was too scared and too unsure. When the pastor began to preach, I listened carefully. He talked about Jesus' love, his sacrifice, and his resurrection. He explained that salvation wasn't earned through good works or religious rituals, but was a free gift received through faith in what Jesus had already done. This was so different from Islam, where I had always believed I had to earn my way to heaven through obedience and good deeds. At the end of the service, the pastor gave what he called an altar call. He asked everyone to bow their heads and close their eyes. Then he said something that made my heart pound. He said he felt like there was someone in the room who wanted to give their life to Jesus but didn't even fully understand what that meant and was really scared. That was exactly me. I knew in that moment I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep sitting on the fence. It was taking more faith to not believe in Jesus than to believe in him. Everything I'd experienced, the peace after praying to him, the beauty of the Gospels, the historical evidence, the transformation I felt inside, all of it pointed to Jesus being real. I made my decision that morning. In my heart, I surrendered my life to Jesus Christ. I accepted that he had died for my sins and risen from the dead. I believed he was God's Son, my Savior, and my Lord. For the first time in my life, I felt truly loved. Not because I had earned it, but because Jesus had chosen to love me freely. But making that decision in my heart was just the beginning. Living it out would cost me everything. I kept my conversion secret for 3 months. I continued attending Friday prayers at the mosque with my family. I wore my hijab. I observed Ramadan. But inside, everything had changed. I was praying to Jesus in secret. I was reading my Bible hidden under textbooks. I was attending church when I told my parents I was studying at the library. The guilt of living this double life was crushing. I knew I couldn't continue lying forever, but I was terrified of what would happen when the truth came out. In Muslim families, especially families like mine where both parents were religious leaders, leaving Islam is the ultimate betrayal. It brings shame on the entire family. Children who convert to Christianity are often disowned, kicked out, sometimes even hurt by their own relatives. The truth came out in July 2014 in the worst possible way. My younger sister found my Bible hidden in my closet while looking for something to borrow. She immediately told my parents. That evening, when I came home from church, my entire family was waiting for me in the living room. My father, mother, 2 sisters, and my uncle who was also a religious leader. My father's face was a mixture of rage and heartbreak. He demanded to know if it was true, if I had become a Christian. I couldn't lie anymore. With my heart pounding and my hands shaking, I told him yes. I explained that I believed Jesus was the Son of God, that he had died for my sins, and that I had given my life to him. The room exploded. My father began shouting that I had betrayed Islam, betrayed our family, and brought shame on our name in the community. My mother started crying uncontrollably. My sisters stared at me like I was a stranger. My uncle declared that I was now an apostate, someone who had left Islam, and according to Islamic law, the punishment for apostasy was death. My father told me I had 1 week to repent and return to Islam. If I didn't, I would no longer be welcome in his home. I would no longer be his daughter. My mother begged me through tears to reconsider, to think about the family, to remember everything they had taught me. But I couldn't deny Jesus. I had experienced his love, his peace, and his truth. I couldn't go back to pretending he wasn't real. That week was the longest of my life. My parents barely spoke to me. My sisters avoided me. News spread through our Muslim community that the Imam's daughter had converted to Christianity. People I had known my whole life called my parents to express their shock and sympathy, as if I had died. When the week ended and I still confessed faith in Jesus, my father kept his word. He told me to pack my things and leave. I was 23 years old, still in graduate school, and suddenly homeless. My mother cried but didn't stop him. My sisters hugged me goodbye, whispering that they hoped I would come back to Islam someday, but they couldn't stand with me now. I moved in with a Christian friend from church who offered me her spare room. But the persecution didn't end with losing my home. My father went to the mosque and publicly announced that he was disowning me. He told the community that I was no longer part of our family, that I had chosen apostasy, and that they should not associate with me. Muslim friends I had known since childhood blocked me on social media and refused to speak to me. My extended family called to tell me I was going to hell. I received threatening messages from people in the community telling me I deserved to die for leaving Islam. Someone even slashed my car tires one night and left a note calling me a traitor. The hardest part was losing my mother. She had been my best friend my whole life. We had cooked together, prayed together, and shared everything. Now she wouldn't take my phone calls. When I tried to visit, my father would answer the door and tell me I wasn't welcome. On my birthday that year, I received nothing from my family, no call, no card, no acknowledgement that I even existed. Graduate school became almost impossible. I was dealing with grief, trauma, and isolation while trying to study medicine. I cried myself to sleep most nights. I questioned whether following Jesus had been worth this price. I felt abandoned by everyone I loved. But even in the darkness, Jesus was there. My Christian friends became my new family. The church helped me with rent when money was tight. Believers prayed for me and encouraged me when I wanted to give up. And most importantly, I experienced Jesus' presence in a real and tangible way. When I prayed, I felt Him near. When I read the Bible, His words brought comfort. When I worshiped, I felt His love surrounding me. 3 years have passed since that painful day in July 2014. I'm still estranged from my biological family. My father has not spoken to me since he asked me to leave. My mother sends occasional messages through my sister, asking if I've returned to Islam yet. The Muslim community I grew up in still treats me as an outcast. But I have no regrets. Jesus has proven Himself faithful. He gave me a new family in the church. He provided for my needs when I had nothing. He healed my broken heart and gave me purpose. And most importantly, He saved my soul and gave me eternal life. I graduated from medical school and now work as a doctor, serving patients regardless of their religion or background. I share my testimony whenever someone asks why I believe in Jesus. And I pray every day that my family will one day see the truth that set me free. Following Jesus cost me everything I had. But He gave me everything I needed. And He is worth it all. If you've read this testimony, please pray for believers around the world who face persecution for following Jesus. Pray especially for those who lose their families when they convert from other religions. Pray that God would protect them, provide for them, and give them courage to stand firm in faith. If you've never surrendered your life to Jesus, I invite you to do that today. Pray with me. Jesus, I recognize I am a sinner who needs saving. I believe You died on the cross for my sins and rose from the dead. I surrender my life to You today. Forgive me, change me, and give me courage to follow You no matter what it costs. Please share this story. Comment where you're watching from. Like and subscribe so more people can hear testimonies that prove Jesus is worth everything.